Hello and welcome to Black Magic, your home for amazing stories. Today's story is what if Harry's accidental magic created a sentient shadow that hunted down every Death Eater who escaped justice. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe if you haven't already. We post new stories regularly. Let's get started. Chapter 1, Shadows Born of Nightmares. Harry Potter slammed his fist against his desk, sending case files scattering across the floor of his cramped Auror office. 3 months of careful investigation, witness interviews, and evidence collection, all for nothing. Bloody hell, Harry. What's happened? Ron poked his head through the doorway, his Auror robe slightly askew as always. Selwyn, Harry spat the name like it was poison. Walking free. Again. Ron's face fell as he entered and closed the door behind him. The Wisingamot didn't. Oh, they did exactly what they always do, Harry interrupted, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Some nonsense about improperly collected evidence and reasonable doubt. Shacklebolt's reforms haven't changed a thing. The old families still protect each other. The frustration burning in Harry's chest had become all too familiar. 3 years after the Battle of Hogwarts, and the Ministry remained a labyrinth of corruption and favoritism. The Death Eaters with money and connections kept slipping through the cracks, while Harry was drowning in paperwork and regulations. Maybe we could reopen the case. Find new evidence. Ron suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. Harry sighed, bending down to collect the scattered files. This was our third attempt, Ron. Selwyn murdered that Muggle family in cold blood, and he'll never see the inside of Azkaban for it. A memo flew into the office, folding itself into the shape of a stern face that spoke in Robart's gruff voice, Potter, Weasley, new assignment. My office, 5 minutes. The paper burst into flames after delivering its message. Perfect timing, Ron said, helping Harry gather the last few papers. New case might clear your head. Harry nodded absently, his mind still fixed on Selwyn's smug face as he'd walked free from the courtroom, flanked by expensive lawyers. The image burned in his mind like a brand. Hours later, Harry stumbled through his front door at Grimmauld Place, exhausted and soaked from the sudden downpour that had caught him between the Ministry and the apparition point. The ancient house creaked its usual welcome, no longer the gloomy mausoleum it had once been. Years of renovation had transformed it into something approaching a home, though Harry still found himself alone more often than not. Creature, he called, shrugging off his wet cloak. The elderly house elf appeared with a crack. Master Harry is late for dinner. Creature has kept it warm. Thanks, but I'm not hungry. Just bring a fire whiskey to the study, would you? Creature's wrinkled face pinched with disapproval, but he nodded and disappeared. Harry climbed the stairs to his study, his body heavy with the weight of another failure. The prophet lay on his desk, and he could already see the headline, Alleged Death Eater Selwyn Acquitted, Insufficient Evidence. He collapsed into his chair, eyes scanning the article that predictably painted the Auror department as incompetent and overzealous. When Creature delivered his fire whiskey, Harry downed it in one burning gulp and requested another. Master should eat something, the house elf insisted. Later, Harry promised, knowing it was a lie. 3 drinks later, Harry pulled out a worn piece of parchment, his list. Names meticulously recorded, some crossed out, others still mockingly untouched. Death Eaters and collaborators who had escaped justice through money, connections, or legal technicalities. Selwyn's name taunted him, unmarked and likely to remain so. Thorfinn Rowell. Augustus Rookwood. Walden McNair. Alecto and Amicus Caro. Corban Yaxley. And dozens more. Some were in Azkaban, but too many walked free, their crimes unpunished. Harry traced his finger down the list, remembering faces from the battle, recalling crime scene photos of their victims. What's the point? He muttered to himself, folding the parchment and tucking it away. What's the bloody point of any of it? The clock struck midnight as Harry finally dragged himself to bed, his dreams already gathering like storm clouds. The nightmare began as it always did, Hogwarts in flames, bodies strewn across the great hall. But tonight, something was different. The faces of the dead morphed into those of Selwyn's victims, the Muggle family whose murder he'd escaped punishment for. The father reached out to Harry, his eyes accusing. "Why couldn't you save us?" he asked. "Why can't you make him pay?" "I tried," Harry said, his voice echoing strangely. "The system doesn't work. They always escape." The scene shifted, and Harry stood in a vast, empty courtroom. The seats of the Wizengamot towered around him, filled with shadowy figures wearing Death Eater masks. "Not guilty," they chanted in unison. "Not guilty. Not guilty." In the center stood not just Selwyn, but all of them, every Death Eater who'd walked free. They laughed at him, their dark marks writhing on their arms. Something snapped inside Harry's chest, a dam breaking, power rushing through him like never before. His rage coalesced, darkening the dream courtroom until shadows swirled around him like a living hurricane. "Enough," he roared, and the darkness responded, stretching from his body like tendrils, hungry and sentient. The shadows engulfed the laughing Death Eaters one by one, silencing their mockery, and Harry felt something tear loose from his very soul. Harry woke with a strangled gasp, his body drenched in sweat despite the cool night air. His scar, dormant for years, prickled uncomfortably, and a strange emptiness pulsed in his chest. The bed sheets were tangled around his legs, and he realized he'd been thrashing in his sleep. Something felt wrong. Different. The air in his bedroom seemed thinner somehow, as if something had been extracted from it. From him. "Lumos," he whispered, and his wand barely flickered before going dark again. Harry frowned, trying once more with greater focus. This time the light held, but dimmer than usual. He sat up, pressing his palm against his chest where the strange hollow feeling persisted. Just a nightmare, he told himself. Just another bloody nightmare. But as Harry laid back down, he couldn't shake the sensation that something had changed, something fundamental. Eventually, exhaustion pulled him back into restless sleep, unaware that miles away, a shadow was moving with purpose through the night. Augustus Rookwood considered himself a practical man. Unlike many of his former associates, he hadn't squandered his freedom on petty vengeance or public displays. After his narrow acquittal, thanks to destroyed evidence and a small fortune paid to the right officials, he'd retreated to a modest but comfortable cottage in rural Norfolk, protected by layers of charms and wards. The former unspeakable kept to himself, venturing out only when necessary, maintaining a quiet life that wouldn't attract attention. Not even his fellow Death Eaters knew his location. Patience was his virtue. The Dark Lord might be gone, but the cause remained, and someday, when memories of the war faded, opportunities would arise again. Tonight, Rookwood sat before his fireplace, annotating an ancient text on soul magic. The spring night was unusually cold, and he built up the fire to chase away the chill. His quill scratched across parchment as he translated a particularly difficult passage. The first sign something was wrong came when his fire dimmed suddenly, though no draft disturbed the room. Rookwood looked up, frowning slightly. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, stretching beyond what the firelight should permit. "Curious," he murmured, drawing his wand. A diagnostic spell revealed his wards remained intact, no intruders had crossed his boundaries. Yet something felt off. The shadows continued to darken and expand, creeping across his floor like spilled ink. Rookwood stood, genuine alarm replacing curiosity. This was no ordinary magic. Lumos Maxima, he cast, but the bright flash barely held the darkness at bay for a moment before being swallowed. That's when he felt it, a presence. Intelligent. Watching. Hungry. "Who's there?" he demanded, backing toward the door. "Show yourself." The shadows paused their advance, then gathered themselves into a vaguely humanoid shape in the center of his living room. It had no distinct features except for what appeared to be eyes, piercing, familiar green eyes that seemed to burn with inner light. Recognition hit Rookwood with paralyzing force. Potter? How did you? The shadow lunged forward with impossible speed. Rookwood fired curse after curse into the darkness, each spell absorbed without effect. Cold tendrils wrapped around his throat, his wrists, his ankles, immobilizing him even as he struggled. The shadow leaned close, and though it had no mouth, Rookwood heard its voice, a whisper that seemed to come from inside his own head. Augustus Rookwood. Department of Mysteries. Inner Circle. 17 confirmed kills during the First Wizarding War. 23 during the Second. Torturer. Murderer. Escaped justice through bribery and destroyed evidence. What are you? Rookwood gasped, his analytical mind still trying to understand even as fear gripped him. The shadow's form rippled. I am what was needed. I am justice when the system fails. I am vengeance long denied. Potter sent you, Rookwood said, struggling against the immovable darkness. A cold laugh echoed in his mind. Potter created me. But he doesn't know I exist, yet. The shadow's tendrils tightened, and Rookwood felt his strength draining, his magic being pulled from his body like water through a sieve. His carefully constructed wards collapsed as the shadow absorbed their energy. His last conscious thought was that he should have gone to France when he had the chance. The next morning, Harry awoke feeling strangely drained. His magic responded sluggishly to simple spells, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He blamed the nightmares and lack of sleep, downing 3 cups of coffee before heading to the ministry. You look like hell, Ron commented as Harry dropped into his desk chair. Feel like it too, Harry admitted. Bad night. Selwyn? Ron asked, knowing his friend too well. Harry nodded, shuffling through the paperwork for their new assignment, a suspected illegal potions operation in Manchester. Routine work, nothing to excite even the greenest auror. Potter. Weasley. Robards burst into their office, his usually composed demeanor shaken. Both aurors straightened instantly. Sir? Harry asked. Change of plans. Drop whatever you're doing. We've got a situation in Norfolk. Ron raised an eyebrow. What kind of situation? Augustus Rookwood has been found dead in his home. Harry's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. Rookwood? The unspeakable Death Eater. The very same. Robards ran a hand through his thinning hair. And it's unusual. I need my best team on this. 20 minutes later, Harry and Ron apparat to a coordinate point near a small stone cottage surrounded by rolling countryside. A team of magical forensics experts already swarmed the scene, their blue robes distinctive against the green landscape. Senior investigator Proudfoot met them at the property line. Fair warning, it's not like anything I've seen before. Harry felt an inexplicable chill as they crossed the threshold into Rookwood's home. The cottage appeared ordinary from the outside, but inside was different. The walls, furniture, even the air itself seemed drained of color, as if something had leached the vibrancy from the entire space. Where's the body? Ron asked, wand already drawn. Proudfoot led them to the living room. Right here, or what's left of it. Harry stopped short at the doorway. In the center of the room lay what appeared to be a desiccated corpse, but not from decay. Rookwood's body looked mummified, every drop of moisture extracted. His skin was pulled tight against his bones, his open eyes sunken deep into their sockets, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. What happened to him? Harry asked, approaching cautiously. That's the question, isn't it? Proudfoot replied. Preliminary tests show no poison, no conventional curses. It's like his life force was simply extracted. Every bit of magical energy, gone. Even his wand was drained. Ron whistled low. Dark magic? Definitely, but nothing we recognize. His wards were top-notch too, completely undisturbed until they suddenly collapsed. Whatever did this bypassed them entirely. Harry crouched beside the body, examining it without touching. The expression of terror on Rookwood's face disturbed him more than the physical condition. The Death Eater had seen his attacker coming. "Any sign of forced entry?" he asked. "None," Proudfoot said. "No magical signatures except Rookwood's own, and even that's faint now." "How was he found?" Ron asked, examining the bookshelves lined with dark texts. "Anonymous tip to the department. Just a location and the message, 'Justice served.'" Harry's head snapped up. "Those exact words?" "Yes." "Why?" "Nothing," Harry said quickly, but his mind raced to his nightmare, to the hollow feeling in his chest that persisted even now. As Ron and Proudfoot discussed theories, Harry moved through the room, drawn to the fireplace where a half-burned log remained. The ash around it formed strange patterns, almost like a handprint, but elongated, with too many fingers. A sudden wave of dizziness hit him, forcing him to brace against the mantelpiece. For a moment, just a split second, he saw the room from another perspective, looking down at Rookwood's terrified face, feeling satisfaction as the life drained from the Death Eater's body. "Harry? You alright, mate?" Ron was at his side, concerned. Harry straightened, disturbed by the vivid flash. "Yeah, just, didn't eat breakfast." "We should collect samples of everything," Harry said, forcing his mind back to protocol. "Whatever did this might leave traces our standard spells aren't detecting." For hours, they documented the scene meticulously, but Harry couldn't shake his unease. By late afternoon, they returned to the ministry with evidence samples and more questions than answers. "I want a full report by tomorrow," Robarts said. "And keep this quiet. If we have something targeting former Death Eaters, it could cause panic." Harry nodded absently, his mind still on the crime scene and the strange momentary vision. "I'm heading to the archives," he told Ron. "Want to check something about Rookwood's case." "Need help?" "No, go home to Hermione." "I won't be long." But 3 hours later, Harry was still buried in files, reading everything about Rookwood's trial and acquittal. The evidence against him had been overwhelming, yet he'd walked free on technicalities. Witnesses had mysteriously changed their statements. Critical evidence had disappeared from ministry storage. Harry's list emerged from his pocket, and he finally crossed off Rookwood's name with a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease. As he returned the files and prepared to leave, a memo zoomed toward him, high priority from Robarts. "Potter, another body. Yaxley. Same condition as Rookwood. Meet at these coordinates immediately." Harry stared at the memo, his heart racing. Yaxley, another name from his list. Another Death Eater who'd escaped justice through manipulation and bribery. As he gathered his cloak, Harry caught his reflection in a darkened window. For an instant, he could have sworn his shadow moved independently of him, stretching toward the memo in his hand. Harry blinked, and everything appeared normal again. Just tired, he told himself. Just overworked and tired. But deep down, in the hollow space inside his chest, something whispered otherwise. Corban Yaxley's body was found in his London townhouse, as desiccated as Rookwood's had been. The same lack of magical signature, the same collapse of powerful wards, the same anonymous tip with the message, "Justice served." 2 in 24 hours, Ron muttered as they examined the scene. "We've got a bloody vigilante on our hands." Harry said nothing, examining Yaxley's corpse with disturbing familiarity. The same position, the same expression of terror. But this time, he noticed something new, a faint residue of shadow-like material under Yaxley's fingernails, as if he'd clawed at something dark. "Get samples of this," Harry instructed one of the forensic wizards, pointing to the residue. "Already tried," the witch replied. "It disappears when we attempt collection. Watch." She demonstrated, reaching toward the shadow substance with a collection veil, only for it to evaporate like smoke. Harry frowned, reaching out himself. The instant his fingers neared the residue, another wave of dizziness hit him, stronger this time. The room spun, and suddenly he wasn't just seeing from another perspective, he was feeling it. Yaxley's pathetic begging, his attempts to bargain, the satisfaction as justice was delivered. "Harry!" Ron's voice cut through the vision, pulling him back. "You're bleeding, mate." Harry touched his face, surprised to find blood trickling from his nose. "Sorry, just headache." "That's more than a headache. You need to see a healer." "I'm fine," Harry insisted, though he felt anything but. The hollow sensation in his chest had expanded, and his magic felt even more sluggish than before. By midnight, they had processed the scene as thoroughly as possible, with little to show for it. The only connection between victims was obvious, both were Death Eaters who had escaped justice. Both had been high-ranking members of Voldemort's forces. Both had committed atrocities and walked free. "This is going to cause a panic in certain circles," Robard said during their debriefing. "Every former Death Eater who dodged Azkaban will think they're next." "Shouldn't we warn them?" a junior Auror asked. Robards fixed him with a stern look. "Our job is to uphold the law, not protect criminals from vigilante justice. That said, yes, we'll issue warnings, officially because it's procedure, unofficially because another murder might give us a chance to catch whoever's doing this." Harry remained silent throughout the discussion, the weight of suspicion growing in his mind. The timing, the targets matching his list, the strange connection he felt to the scenes. After the meeting, he slipped away before Ron could question him further, heading not for Grimmauld Place but for the one person who might understand what was happening. Hermione's surprise at finding Harry on her doorstep at 1 a.m. quickly turned to concern. "You look terrible," she said, ushering him inside. "Ron told me about the cases." "I need your help," Harry said without preamble. "Something's happening to me, and I think I might be involved in these deaths." Hermione's expression didn't change, but she locked and warded her door before leading him to the kitchen. "Tell me everything." And he did, the nightmares, the strange hollow feeling, the visions at the crime scenes, his suspicions about the connection to his list of escaped Death Eaters. Throughout his explanation, Hermione listened without interruption, her brilliant mind visibly processing. "When did this start exactly?" she finally asked. "After Selwyn's acquittal. I had the nightmare that night." Hermione pulled a book from her shelf, an advanced text on magical theory. "There's something called a magical fracture that might explain this. In cases of extreme emotional distress, particularly for powerful wizards, it's theoretically possible for magic to split off." "Split off," Harry repeated. "You mean like a Horcrux?" "No," Hermione said quickly. "Nothing that dark. More like an unconscious manifestation. Your magic responding to your deepest desires and frustrations when you couldn't consciously act on them. So I've created some kind of, what? Magical assassin?" "More like a shadow self," Hermione said, turning pages rapidly. "A part of your magic given purpose and limited autonomy. It's incredibly rare, but documented in a few historical cases." "How do I stop it?" Harry asked, running a hand through his hair. Hermione looked up, her expression grave. "That's the problem. You can't just destroy it, it's still part of you. Attempting to do so could damage your own magical core. But I can't let it keep killing people. Even people who deserve it?" Hermione asked softly. "Even murderers who escaped justice?" Harry stared at her, shocked. "Don't tell me you approve." "Of course not," she said quickly. "But I understand the impulse. The system failed, Harry. You tried to work within it, and it failed repeatedly. That doesn't justify murder." "No, it doesn't." Hermione sighed. "According to the texts, you'd need to reintegrate this shadow part of yourself. Acknowledge it, accept it as part of you, and then reclaim it. How do I find it?" "You might not need to." Hermione reached across the table, taking his hand. "If I'm right, it will return to you periodically to refuel, for lack of a better term. It's still your magic, after all. It can't sustain itself indefinitely. Harry thought of the increasing drain he'd felt, the difficulty casting even simple spells. And if I don't reintegrate it? Hermione's grip tightened. Eventually, it would drain too much of your magical core. Best case, you'd lose your magical abilities. Worst case. She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Harry understood the stakes. I need to find it before it kills again. No, Hermione corrected. You need to find it before it takes too much of you with it. Dawn found Harry sitting on the roof of Grimmauld Place, waiting. If Hermione was right, and she usually was, his shadow self would return to him eventually, seeking to replenish its energy. He could feel the drain more acutely now, his magic responding weakly even to the simplest Lumos charm. The pink light of sunrise bathed London, and Harry closed his eyes, reaching inward to the hollow space where part of him was missing. He had spent the remainder of the night researching with Hermione, learning what little was known about magical fractures. I know what you are, he whispered to the empty air. I know what I created. I want to talk to you. Nothing happened for long minutes, and Harry was about to give up when the temperature around him dropped suddenly. His shadow on the rooftop stretched and deepened, pulling away from his body until it stood before him, a dark silhouette with his outline but composed entirely of shifting darkness. Only the eyes were distinct, his own green eyes staring back at him. Creator, it acknowledged, its voice echoing inside Harry's mind rather than in the air between them. You've been killing Death Eaters, Harry said, neither a question nor an accusation, simply a statement. The shadow nodded. I fulfill your true desire. Justice when the system fails. By murdering them. By judging them. By punishing their crimes when no one else would. The shadow moved closer. I am what you created in your moment of despair. I am your will unleashed. I never wanted this, Harry argued, though even as he said it, he recognized the partial lie. He had wanted justice, desperately, consumingly. Didn't you? The shadow gestured to where Harry's list remained in his pocket. You marked them. You tracked them. You raged against their freedom. I simply acted where you could not. Harry felt the truth in those words like a physical blow. How many more are you planning to kill? The shadow seemed to consult some internal knowledge. There are 17 more who escaped true justice. 17 who hurt, who tortured, who killed, and walked free. I can't let you continue, Harry said, standing to face his creation directly. You can't stop me, the shadow replied, not threatening but matter of fact. I am your magic-given purpose. I will complete that purpose. And then what? You'll return to me? The shadow pulsed, seeming to consider. Perhaps. Or perhaps I will find new purpose. New injustices to correct. The implication sent a chill through Harry. An autonomous fragment of his magic, untethered from his conscience or restraint, judging and executing those it deemed guilty. You need my magic to sustain yourself, Harry said. That's why you're here now. Yes. I will take what I need and continue my work. And if I refuse? The shadow's form rippled. You cannot refuse. I am you, Harry Potter. I am your darkest wish-given form. Before Harry could react, the shadow lunged forward, wrapping around him like a freezing blanket. He felt his magic being siphoned away, strength leaving his limbs. He struggled against the sensation, trying to push the entity away, but it was like fighting against quicksand. With the last of his strength, Harry cast the spell Hermione had found, a complex charm designed to temporarily bind a magical fracture. Fracturum religare. The shadow screeched, a sound that existed only in Harry's mind but was no less painful for it. It recoiled, its form becoming less defined, more smoke than substance. You cannot bind me forever, it hissed before dissipating into the morning air, leaving Harry collapsed on the rooftop, magically exhausted but successful, for now. He had bought himself time, but the binding was temporary. 3 days, Hermione had estimated. 3 days to figure out how to permanently deal with his shadow self before it resumed its deadly mission of justice. The next morning's prophet carried the news Harry had been dreading: mysterious death stalked former Death Eaters, 2 found dead in 24 hours. Ministry baffled. The article detailed the discovered bodies of Rookwood and Yaxley, speculating wildly about the cause and perpetrator. Some theories mentioned revenge from families of victims, others suggested a ministry-sanctioned cleanup operation. The most disturbing theory, however, came from an anonymous source claiming this was the work of a new Dark Lord rising. "Brilliant," Harry muttered, tossing the paper aside as he entered the Auror office. "Just what we need, mass panic." Ron was already at his desk, bags under his eyes matching Harry's own. "Robards is going mental. Kingsley's called an emergency meeting of department heads. Any new leads?" "Nothing solid. But there's something else." Ron lowered his voice. "The surviving Death Eaters are gathering. Our informants say Lucius Malfoy is organizing some kind of protection pact." Harry raised an eyebrow. "Malfoy? I thought he was keeping his head down these days." "Self-preservation," Ron replied. "He's on the list of those who dodged Azkaban through bribes and cooperation. Probably thinks he's next." The mention of a list made Harry's stomach clench. Was Malfoy on his list? He couldn't remember, but the Shadow would know. "We should track their movements," Harry suggested. "Whoever's doing this might target their gathering." Ron nodded, unaware of the real reason behind Harry's suggestion. Throughout the day, Harry went through the motions of investigation while his mind raced with possible solutions to his shadow problem. The binding spell would hold for less than 3 days now, and he'd felt the shadow testing its constraints already, like a persistent pressure against his consciousness. By evening, intelligence confirmed that a meeting of former Death Eaters would take place that night at an abandoned manor in Wiltshire, not Malfoy Manor, but a property with similar protections. "We should observe," Harry told Robards. "Not intervene unless the killer shows up." "Agreed," the head Auror said. "But small team only, you, Weasley, and Proudfoot. We don't want to spook them." As Harry prepared for the stakeout, he fought against the growing sensation of his shadow self pushing against its bindings. It knew what he was planning: to use the Death Eater gathering as bait, to capture his fracture rather than to catch it in the act. "You won't succeed," a voice whispered in the back of his mind. "They deserve their fate." Harry shook his head, forcing the voice away. Yet as he checked his equipment, a small, treacherous part of him wondered if his shadow was right. The system had failed. These Death Eaters had tortured, murdered, and destroyed countless lives, yet lived in freedom and comfort while their victims remained dead or permanently scarred. No, he reminded himself firmly. Vigilante justice wasn't the answer. It couldn't be. But as night fell and Harry positioned himself in the woods overlooking the manor where his enemies gathered, the boundary between his thoughts and the shadows blurred ever more dangerously. Lucius Malfoy's hand trembled slightly as he raised his glass, addressing the gathered survivors of the Dark Lord's inner circle. "To survival," he said, his once proud voice now tinged with fear. "And to united defense against this new threat." A dozen men and women, all who had escaped Azkaban through money, connections, or technicalities, raised their glasses in return. Their faces showed varying degrees of concern, from mild worry to outright terror. "2 of our number dead in as many days," Malfoy continued, setting down his drink. "Whatever this entity is, it targets us specifically. Our conventional protections are useless against it. How can we fight what we cannot see or detect?" Selwyn asked, his recent acquittal now seeming more curse than blessing. "Together," Malfoy replied. "Ancient magics exist, blood wards that can detect and trap even spirits and non-corporeal entities. If we pool our knowledge and resources." Outside, Harry watched the gathering through enhanced vision charms, straining to hear their conversation. His shadow self pushed harder against its bindings, rage building at the sight of so many unpunished criminals plotting their defense. "Let me finish them," the voice in his mind urged. "All in one place. Justice served completely." "No," Harry whispered aloud, causing Ron to look at him strangely. "You all right?" Ron asked. "Fine," Harry lied. "Just thinking aloud." The pressure inside him built as Malfoy continued outlining his defense plan. Each Death Eater would contribute rare artifacts and knowledge, creating a network of detection spells to warn them of the entity's approach. They would never again be caught unaware as Rookwood and Yaxley had been. "They will escape again," his shadow self insisted. "The system failed. I will not." Harry closed his eyes, fighting for control, but the binding spell was weakening under the shadow's determined assault. 3 days, Hermione had promised, but she hadn't accounted for the shadow's strength when confronted with so many targets at once. Inside the manor, something changed. Malfoy stopped mid-sentence, staring at the shadows in the corner of the room, which seemed to deepen unnaturally. "It's here," he whispered, reaching for his wand. "The wards aren't ready," Selwyn finished, backing toward the door. Too late. The shadows erupted from every corner of the room, coalescing into a humanoid shape with burning green eyes. The Death Eaters fired spells that passed harmlessly through the entity. Outside, Harry clutched his chest, feeling the binding shatter as his shadow self fully manifested inside the manor. "No. What's happening?" Ron demanded, but Harry was already running toward the building, magical exhaustion forgotten in his desperation. Inside, chaos reigned. The shadow moved with impossible speed, engulfing one Death Eater after another, draining their magic and life force in seconds. 3 bodies lay desiccated on the floor before the others even reached the door. Malfoy, more prepared than the others, cast a rare containment spell that momentarily slowed the entity. "Run! To the circle in the garden. Complete the ritual." The remaining Death Eaters fled through the rear doors, the shadow breaking free and pursuing. Harry burst through the front entrance, immediately confronted by the grotesque sight of the drained corpses. He recognized Selwyn among them, his face frozen in the same expression of terror as the others. Following the sounds of panic, Harry raced through the manor and into the sprawling gardens behind. There, he found the remaining Death Eaters forming a circle around an elaborately carved stone platform. Malfoy stood at its center, chanting in a language Harry didn't recognize while drawing symbols in what appeared to be his own blood. The shadow hovered at the edge of the garden, seemingly hesitant to approach the ritual circle. "Harry!" Ron's voice called from behind him. "What the hell is that thing?" Before Harry could answer, the shadow noticed his presence. Its form rippled with what Harry somehow knew was recognition. "Creator," it acknowledged silently. "You cannot stop this justice." "This isn't justice," Harry called out, stepping forward. "This is vengeance. There's a difference." Malfoy's chanting grew louder as the blood symbols began to glow with eerie light. Whatever ritual they were performing, it was nearing completion. The shadow assessed the situation, then made its decision. Rather than attacking the protected Death Eaters, it surged toward Harry, engulfing him before anyone could react. The world went black as Harry felt himself falling into his own shadow. Harry found himself in a void, not darkness exactly, but an absence of everything except himself and the shadow, which now took a more defined form that mirrored his own appearance. "Why do you fight me?" it asked, its voice clearer here in this mental space. "We want the same thing." "No," Harry insisted. "I want justice, yes. But real justice, trials, evidence, proper sentences. A system that has failed repeatedly. So we change the system. We don't abandon it." The shadow circled him, its movements fluid and predatory. "They murdered. Tortured. Destroyed families. And they laughed while walking free." Images flashed around them, crime scene photos Harry had studied, testimonies he'd heard, victims he'd interviewed. The shadow was using his own memories against him. "I know what they did," Harry said quietly. "Better than most." "Then why protect them? Why save creatures like Lucius Malfoy, who introduced a Horcrux into a school? Who stood by while a child was tortured in his home? Who betrayed and murdered without remorse?" "I'm not protecting them," Harry argued. "I'm protecting what separates us from them. Laws. Principles. Humanity." The shadow laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the void. "Pretty words. Empty comfort to the dead." Harry felt his resolve wavering. The shadow spoke his darkest thoughts, voiced his deepest frustrations. How many times had he wanted to take justice into his own hands? How many times had he fantasized about making these monsters pay when the system had failed? "If we abandon the rule of law," Harry said, more to himself than to the shadow, "then we become what we fought against." "Sometimes justice requires action outside the law," the shadow countered. "You know this. You've always known this." The void around them shifted, showing Harry his own actions during the war, breaking into Gringotts, using unforgivable curses, operating outside any legal authority to do what needed to be done. That was different, Harry insisted, though the argument sounded weak even to himself. Was it? Or did you simply recognize that sometimes extraordinary threats require extraordinary measures? The shadow moved closer. "These Death Eaters continue to threaten our world through corruption and influence. They poison the very system you claim to uphold." Harry had no ready answer. The shadow was right, the escaped Death Eaters undermined the system from within, using their gold and connections to pervert justice. How could you fix a corrupted system while allowing those who corrupted it to remain free? Outside the mental void, in the physical world, Harry's body stood motionless as the shadow enveloped him. Ron and Proudfoot cast spells that dissipated harmlessly against the dark cocoon, while Malfoy and the remaining Death Eaters completed their ritual. "Now!" Malfoy shouted, activating the blood circle. A shockwave of magic erupted from the ritual site, striking the shadow-encased Harry with tremendous force. Inside the void, both Harry and his shadow self felt the impact. "They're trying to destroy me," the shadow snarled. "To destroy us." Harry felt the magic of the ritual tearing at the shadow, and by extension, at himself. The pain was excruciating, like being ripped in half on a magical level. "Stop," he screamed, though no one in the physical world could hear him. "You're killing both of us." The shadow's form began to fragment under the assault of the ritual magic. "We are connected. If I die, part of you dies too." Harry understood suddenly what Hermione had meant. The shadow wasn't just using his magic, it was his magic, a piece of his very essence. Destroying it would be like destroying a piece of his soul. In that moment of clarity, Harry made his choice. "You're right," he told his shadow self. "The system is broken. These Death Eaters deserve punishment. But this isn't the way." "What other way exists?" the shadow demanded, continuing to fracture under the ritual's assault. "We reform the system together," Harry said. "Not as separate entities, one acting within the law, one outside it, but as a whole person who understands both justice and mercy." He reached out toward his shadow self, not trying to bind or control it, but to embrace it. "You're part of me. My anger, my frustration, my desire for justice. I created you because I couldn't accept those parts of myself. But I need to." The shadow hesitated, its disintegration momentarily paused. "Accept me? After trying to bind me?" "Yes," Harry said firmly. "I was wrong to deny you. Wrong to pretend I didn't want what you wanted. But killing isn't the answer. It never was. Then what is?" "Change," Harry said simply. "Real, lasting change to a broken system. Using our position, our influence, our power, together, to ensure no Death Eater escapes justice again." He stepped closer to his fragmenting shadow self, hands still extended. I need you. Your anger. Your determination. Your unwillingness to accept failure. But I need them as part of me, not separate from me. The shadow studied him for a long moment, weighing his sincerity. And if the system fails again? If they continue to walk free? Then we find another way, Harry promised. A better way than murder. But whatever we do it together, as one. The shadow's form wavered, then moved toward Harry's outstretched hand. Together, it agreed. One magic. One purpose. As they touched, the mental void collapsed around them. In the physical world, the shadow cocoon surrounding Harry pulsed with intense light, then imploded, absorbing back into his body with such force that it knocked everyone in the garden off their feet. Harry remained standing, eyes glowing with power as his fractured magic reintegrated, stronger for having acknowledged all aspects of itself. The hollow feeling in his chest was gone, replaced by a wholeness he hadn't felt in years. The ritual circle sputtered and died, its power insufficient against the combined force of Harry and his shadow self, now reunited. Malfoy stared up from where he'd fallen, blood still dripping from his self-inflicted ritual wounds. Potter? It was you? All along. Harry approached the fallen Death Eater, magic crackling visibly around him. Not exactly. But close enough. Ron and Proudfoot recovered, wands trained uncertainly on the scene before them. Harry? Ron called. What's happening? What was that thing? Harry turned to his friend, his green eyes gradually returning to normal. Long story. But it's over now. He faced the remaining Death Eaters, who cowered on the ground, wandless and terrified. You've escaped justice too many times, Harry told them, his voice eerily doubled for a moment before settling. But no more. This time, you'll face proper trials, with new evidence. What evidence? Malfoy sneered, though fear undercut his attempted bravado. Harry smiled, and in that smile was a shadow of the entity that had hunted them. Everything your friends Rookwood and Yaxley knew before they died. Everything they confessed in their final moments. My shadow self was very thorough in extracting confessions. The blood drained from Malfoy's face. You're bluffing. Try me, Harry challenged, memories of confessions extracted by his shadow self now accessible in his reunited mind. I know about the vault in Zurich. The ledger of bribes. The blackmail material you've collected on Wisengamot members. Malfoy's expression confirmed the truth. The other Death Eaters looked similarly stricken as Harry casually mentioned their hidden crimes and secrets. Arrest them, Harry told Ron and Proudfoot. All of them. We have work to do. In the days that followed, the wizarding world reeled from the arrests and subsequent confessions of some of the most prominent escaped Death Eaters. Evidence mysteriously appeared implicating not only the Death Eaters themselves but corrupt officials who had aided their evasion of justice. No one connected these events to the mysterious deaths of Rookwood and Yaxley, which remained officially unsolved. The leading theory became that they had been killed by their own allies to prevent them from revealing incriminating information. Harry never publicly explained what had happened in that garden. Ron and Hermione were the only ones who knew the full truth, sworn to secrecy for obvious reasons. So the shadow is gone? Ron asked one evening as the three friends sat in Harry's study at Grimmauld Place. Not gone, Harry corrected, sipping his fire whiskey. Reintegrated. It was never separate from me, not really. Just a part one refused to acknowledge. And you're okay with that? Hermione asked carefully. With knowing what it did? Harry considered the question seriously. I'm not proud of the deaths. But I understand why they happened. My magic acted on desires I wouldn't consciously admit to having. And now? Ron pressed. Now I accept those desires as part of me, Harry said. The anger. The frustration. The need for justice at any cost. But I also choose how to channel them. He pulled out his list, now with additional names crossed off, not through death but through proper arrests and pending trials. The system is changing, Harry continued. Shacklebolt's implementing the reforms we proposed. Independent oversight of the Waisengamot. Mandatory veritaserum for violent crimes. Protections for witnesses. Hermione nodded approvingly. All legal. All proper. And far more effective in the long run than vigilante justice, Harry agreed. My shadow self wanted justice immediately. I want justice that lasts. As his friends eventually departed, Harry stood before the window of his study, looking out at the night sky. In the reflection of the glass, he could see his shadow, perfectly normal, perfectly aligned with his movements. But sometimes, in quiet moments like this, he could still feel that other part of himself, the shadow that had hunted Death Eaters through the night. Not separate anymore, but integrated, acknowledged, accepted. Justice would come for the remaining names on his list. But it would come through the system they were building, not through the darkness of night. Harry smiled at his reflection, and for a brief moment, his shadow seemed to smile back. Chapter 2, The Hunter and the Hunted. Harry jolted awake, sweat-soaked sheets tangled around his legs. The dream had been vivid. He'd been stalking through darkness, hunting a fleeing figure, feeling the exhilarating rush as terror radiated from his prey. When he'd finally caught the nameless Death Eater, the satisfaction of watching life drain away had been perfect. Shit, he muttered, pressing the heels of his palms against his eyes. 3 weeks since the garden incident. 3 weeks since he'd supposedly reintegrated his shadow self. 3 weeks of telling himself everything was under control. The bedside clock showed 3:17 a.m. Sleep wasn't happening again tonight. Harry dragged himself to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face before staring at his reflection. His eyes looked normal, no eerie glow, no hint of the power that had surged through him during the reintegration. But something felt off, like an itch just beneath his skin. You're part of me now, he whispered to his reflection. We're one person. One magic. His shadow on the wall behind him rippled slightly, so briefly he might have imagined it, before settling back to normal. Just paranoia, Harry told himself. The after-effects of magical trauma, nothing more. Hermione had warned him it would take time for his magic to fully stabilize after such a significant fracture and reintegration. Still, he couldn't shake the hollow feeling that had returned to his chest over the past few days, not as pronounced as before, but definitely there. And his dreams, they weren't memories. They were new hunts, new victims. Harry made his way downstairs, the ancient floorboards of Grimmauld Place creaking under his bare feet. In the kitchen, he found Creature already awake, preparing tea as if he'd anticipated Harry's insomnia. Master Harry doesn't sleep well, the house elf observed, pushing a steaming cup toward him. Just dreams, Creature. Harry accepted the tea gratefully. Nothing to worry about. Master's magic feels different, Creature said bluntly, his bulbous eyes narrowing. Darker. Stronger. Like the old days of the House of Black. Harry nearly choked on his tea. What do you mean? Creature shrugged his bony shoulders. House elves feel magic differently than wizards. Master's magic used to be bright, now it has shadows in it. Not bad. Just different. Harry set down his cup, unsettled by the elf's assessment. When did you first notice this change? After Master came home from the garden fight. Master's magic came back stronger, but with shadows. Creature turned back to his early morning baking. Makes cleaning easier. Dark magic stains come out better now. Harry didn't find that particularly reassuring. By morning, Harry had almost convinced himself his concerns were overblown. The Auror office was buzzing with activity when he arrived, a welcome distraction from his unsettling night. Morning, Harry. Ron called from his desk, buried under case files. Seen the news? Harry shook his head, dropping into his chair and accepting the copy of the Daily Prophet Ron slid across to him. Weisengamot scandal deepens, 3 more members resign. Corruption probe exposes Death Eater sympathizers in highest court. That's 12 resignations in 3 weeks, Ron said, satisfaction evident in his voice. The evidence keeps piling up against them. The evidence that had mysteriously appeared following the garden incident. Evidence that Harry's shadow self had somehow extracted during its brief reign of terror. Evidence that Harry shouldn't have access to, yet somehow did, buried in his mind like half-forgotten dreams. Shacklebolt's pushing through the reform package next week, Ron continued. With the old guard jumping ship, it might actually pass this time. Good, Harry said, meaning it. This was how justice should work, through the system, with evidence, trials, and proper sentencing. Not through midnight executions and drained corpses. Potter. Weasley. Robards beckoned them from his office doorway. Need you both, now. They found their boss looking unusually grave, a Ministry intelligence report open on his desk. We've got movement from the remaining Death Eaters, Robards said without preamble. Lucius Malfoy is calling in favors, gathering resources. Intelligence suggests he's building some kind of coalition. Against the Ministry? Harry asked. Against whatever killed Rookwood and Yaxley, Robards corrected. Malfoy seems convinced the threat remains active, despite no new incidents in weeks. Harry carefully kept his expression neutral. Any indication what they're planning? Nothing specific. But we've intercepted communications mentioning rare artifacts, ancient texts on entity containment, and something called shadow binding. Robards fixed Harry with a searching look. Ring any bells? Harry felt cold sweat form on his back. Could be referencing any number of dark containment rituals. The one they attempted in the garden didn't work. That's what concerns me, Robards said. Malfoy isn't stupid. If the ritual failed once, he won't try the same approach again. He's looking for something more powerful, more definitive. You think he might succeed? Ron asked. Robards sighed, leaning back in his chair. I think desperate people with resources and nothing to lose are dangerous. Especially when they're former Death Eaters with extensive knowledge of the dark arts. What's our move? Harry asked, trying to ignore the whisper of concern growing in his mind. If Malfoy found a way to trap his shadow self, assuming it was still somehow separate from him, what would that do to Harry's own magic? Surveillance, for now, Robards decided. We don't have cause for arrests yet, and frankly, I'm not opposed to them developing protection against whatever killed their friends. Better than having more unexplained deaths on our hands. As they left Robards' office, Ron nudged Harry's shoulder. You okay, mate? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just tired, Harry lied. Bad dreams. About the shadow thing? Ron asked in a lower voice. Harry nodded. It's probably nothing. After effects of the reintegration, like Hermione said. Well, if anyone could figure out how to bottle and control a piece of Harry Potter's magic, it'd be Lucius Malfoy, Ron said, clearly joking. Good thing that shadow's part of you again, right? Yeah, Harry agreed weakly. Good thing. Throughout the day, Harry's unease grew. The hollow feeling in his chest expanded during a department meeting, causing him to briefly lose focus mid-sentence. During a routine spell demonstration for junior Aurors, his magic fluctuated wildly, a simple Expelliarmus blasting a training dummy across the room with far more force than intended. Impressive modification, Auror Williamson commented, misinterpreting the display. But a bit excessive for training, Potter. By evening, Harry could no longer ignore the signs. Something was wrong with his magic, or more specifically, with his shadow self. It wasn't fully reintegrated as he'd believed. Part of it remained separate, autonomous, perhaps growing stronger again. Instead of heading home, Harry made his way to the Department of Mysteries. If anyone could help him understand magical fractures better, it would be the Unspeakables. He had contacts there, people who owed him favors since the war. Unspeakable Croaker met him in a nondescript corridor, his hood pulled low over his face as usual. Potter. Unusual to see you in our department. I need information, Harry said bluntly. Privately. Croaker led him to a small study room, warding the door before turning to Harry expectantly. What do you know about magical fractures? Harry asked. Specifically, portions of a wizard's magic gaining autonomy. Croaker went very still. This is theoretical, I assume. Of course, Harry lied. Such occurrences are extremely rare, Croaker began cautiously. Documented only a handful of times in wizarding history. The most famous case was Herpo the Foul, who allegedly split his magic deliberately to create a servant. And if it happens accidentally? Can the fracture be reintegrated? Croaker studied Harry intently. In theory, yes. But complete reintegration requires total acceptance of the fractured aspect. Any resistance, any rejection of what the fracture represents, would prevent full reunification. Harry thought of his conflicted feelings about the Shadow's actions, his horror at the murders coupled with his satisfaction at seeing justice served. Had that ambivalence prevented true reintegration? And if partial reintegration occurs? Harry pressed. The fracture would remain connected to the original magical core, drawing power when needed, but maintaining some autonomy. Croaker's voice lowered. Such a situation would be unstable. Eventually, the fracture would either fully reintegrate or Harry prompted when Croaker hesitated. Or it would become completely independent. A new magical entity, separate from its creator. Harry felt the blood drain from his face. That's possible. With sufficient power and a strong enough purpose, yes. Croaker leaned forward slightly. Potter, these questions, they're not truly theoretical, are they? Before Harry could respond, a silver lynx Patronus glided through the wall, Kingsley Shacklebolt's messenger. Harry, the lynx spoke in Kingsley's deep voice. Come to my office immediately. There's been another death. The Minister for Magic paced behind his desk, his usually calm demeanor visibly shaken. Harry stood rigidly before him, fighting to maintain a neutral expression despite the turmoil inside. Thorfinn Rowell, Kingsley said grimly. Found in his safe house in Cornwall an hour ago. Same condition as Rookwood and Yaxley, completely drained of life and magic. Harry's heart pounded against his ribs. Rowell had been on his list, a particularly vicious Death Eater who'd escaped justice through a technicality involving contaminated evidence. I thought this was over, Kingsley continued. 3 weeks without incident, and suddenly. He trailed off, studying Harry's face. You don't seem surprised. I'm an Auror, Minister, Harry replied carefully. Very little surprises me these days. Kingsley didn't appear convinced. After what happened in the garden with Malfoy and the others, Robard suggested you might have insights into this case that others don't. Did he now? Harry kept his tone neutral. He mentioned a shadow entity. One that seemed to recognize you. Kingsley stopped pacing, fixing Harry with his penetrating gaze. Harry, if you know something about what's killing these Death Eaters, now is the time to share it. The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken questions. Harry weighed his options, tell Kingsley the truth and risk everything, or continue hiding a secret that might put others in danger. I had a theory, Harry finally said, choosing his words with extreme care. After investigating the first deaths, I believed we might be dealing with a manifestation of accidental magic, possibly from a victim seeking revenge. And now? Now I'm not sure, Harry admitted. I thought the entity was contained after the garden incident. Kingsley's eyes narrowed. Contained how, exactly? I'd rather not speculate further without evidence, Harry deflected. But I'd like to examine Rowell's body. There might be clues the regular forensics team would miss. After a long moment, Kingsley nodded. Granted. But Harry. His voice softened slightly. Whatever this is, whatever you know or suspect, remember who you are. What you stand for. The minister's words hit uncomfortably close to Harry's internal struggle. I always do, Kingsley. The examination of Raoul's body revealed exactly what Harry feared, the same magical signature as the previous deaths, but stronger this time, more defined. His shadow self was evolving, growing more powerful with each kill. Worse, Harry found a note clutched in Raoul's desiccated hand, written in handwriting disturbingly similar to his own, justice comes for all who deserve it. 3 down. 14 remain. Harry pocketed the note before anyone else could see it. His shadow was becoming bolder, leaving messages now. And the count matched his list exactly, 17 Death Eaters who had escaped justice, 3 now dead, 14 still to go. By midnight, Harry sat in Hermione's kitchen once again, having operated directly there after leaving the ministry. Ron joined them, summoned by Hermione's Patronus. It's getting worse, Harry concluded after explaining everything, the dreams, the hollow feeling, Raoul's death, and the note. The reintegration didn't fully take. Part of the shadow is still out there, hunting independently. Hermione paced, her analytical mind visibly working through the problem. The partial reintegration might actually have made it stronger. It can draw on your magic more efficiently now, with less effort. Great, Harry groaned. So I've basically supercharged my homicidal shadow. We need to find it, Ron said practically. Trap it somehow, then complete the reintegration properly. It won't be easy to trap, Hermione warned. It's learning, adapting. And from what you've described, Harry, it's developing a stronger sense of autonomy. I created a monster, Harry whispered, the full weight of responsibility crushing down on him. No, Hermione said firmly. You created a fragment of yourself that's acting on impulses you've suppressed. There's a difference. Tell that to the families of whoever it kills next, Harry shot back. Ron leaned forward. Mate, every person on your list is a Death Eater who escaped justice. They're not innocent victims. That doesn't make vigilante executions right. Harry snapped. No, it doesn't, Hermione agreed. But understanding the shadow's motivation is key to stopping it. It believes it's fulfilling your deepest desire for justice. Harry ran a hand through his hair. So how do I find it? How do I stop it? Hermione considered for a moment. The shadow seems most active when its targets gather. If Malfoy is indeed organizing the remaining Death Eaters, that might draw it out. So we need information on Malfoy's movements, Ron concluded. Someone on the inside. A solution occurred to all 3 of them simultaneously. Draco, Harry said. We need to talk to Draco Malfoy. Finding Draco proved easier than expected. Since the war, the younger Malfoy had distanced himself from his father's activities, establishing a small but respected apothecary in a quiet corner of Diagon Alley. Unlike most shops in the Wizarding District, Malfoy's medicinals kept evening hours, catering to those who needed remedies after normal business hours. The bell chimed softly as Harry entered alone, having decided a solo approach might be less threatening. Draco looked up from his ledger, his pointed face showing momentary surprise before settling into careful neutrality. Potter, he acknowledged. Interesting. I was actually considering contacting you. That wasn't what Harry had expected. You were. Business first, Draco said, gesturing to a chair opposite his counter. What brings the Ministry's golden boy to my humble establishment after hours? Harry sat, studying his former rival. Draco had changed since Hogwarts, still slender and pale, but the arrogant sneer had been replaced by something more thoughtful, more measured. Wartime trauma had left its mark on everyone. It's not an official visit, Harry clarified. I need information about your father's recent activities. Draco's expression didn't change. Straight to the point as always. Why would I help you spy on my father? Because whatever he's planning could be dangerous, for him and for you. Harry leaned forward. I know he's gathering the remaining Death Eaters, collecting artifacts for some kind of ritual or protection. And why would that concern you? Draco asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Because it might draw the attention of whatever killed Rookwood, Yaxley, and now Raoul. Draco's carefully maintained composure slipped. Raoul is dead. When? Today. Same as the others, completely drained of magic and life. Draco stood abruptly, flipping the sign on his door to closed and activating additional wards with a complex wand movement. When he returned, his voice was lower, more urgent. You know what's killing them, don't you? That's why you're here. Harry hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I have a theory. It's a manifestation of magic, a shadow entity that targets Death Eaters who escaped justice. It seems to have knowledge of their crimes, their evasions. A shadow with green eyes, Draco said quietly. A shadow that looks like you. Harry's blood ran cold. How do you know that? Because my father captured an image of it, Draco replied, watching Harry's reaction carefully. Modified pensive technology combined with dark detection spells. The image wasn't clear, but the resemblance was notable. And what does your father think? Harry asked, working to keep his voice steady. That you've created some kind of vengeance construct. Draco's eyes narrowed. But that's not quite right, is it, Potter? This is something else. Something even you can't fully control. The perceptiveness of Draco's assessment was unnerving. Harry considered denying everything, but something told him honesty might be his best approach. Your father's ritual in the garden, Harry said instead. What was it supposed to do? Trap and destroy the entity, Draco answered. It failed because the magic was too complex, too tied to a living source. He paused meaningfully. Too tied to you. Their eyes met, mutual understanding passing between them. What's he planning now? Harry asked. Draco seemed to make a decision, his shoulders squaring. Something worse. Much worse. He's found references to an ancient binding ritual, one used by dark wizards to capture and enslave magical entities. If it works, he wouldn't just trap your shadow. He'd control it. Harry felt ill at the implications. Turn it into a weapon. Exactly. Draco ran a hand through his platinum hair. That's why I was considering contacting you. Whatever this shadow is, however it came to be, having it under my father's control would be catastrophic. Why tell me this? Harry asked. Why betray your father's plans? Draco's laugh was bitter. Betray? Potter, I've spent 3 years trying to rebuild my life, to create something separate from my family's legacy. I have no interest in seeing my father restart a magical war or create another Dark Lord. The sincerity in Draco's voice was unmistakable. People could change, Harry had seen it before, even in those he'd once considered enemies. When is this ritual happening? Harry asked. 3 nights from now. New moon. Draco pulled a folded parchment from beneath the counter. Here's the location and what I know of the ritual components. They're still gathering some of the rarer elements. Harry accepted the parchment, surprised by Draco's cooperation. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Draco warned. There's something else you should know. My father believes the shadow returns to its source periodically, to replenish itself. He's right, Harry admitted. Then you're in danger too, Potter. Draco's gray eyes were solemn. The ritual requires the entity to be at full strength when captured. They'll try to force it to return to you, drain you completely, before springing their trap. How would they do that? By giving it too many targets to resist, Draco said grimly. They're planning to gather all the remaining marked Death Eaters in one location, a feast of victims to draw your shadow out at maximum power. A trap within a trap, Harry murmured. Precisely. Draco held Harry's gaze. Whatever this shadow is, whatever connection it has to you, be careful, Potter. My father is desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. As Harry left the apothecary, the hollow feeling in his chest pulsed like a second heartbeat. His shadow was hunting tonight, he could feel it. And soon, it would need to return to him for more power, walking right into Lucius Malfoy's elaborate trap. The following day passed in a blur of preparation. Harry, Ron, and Hermione gathered at Grimmauld Place, converting the drawing room into a war room of sorts. Draco's intelligence had been comprehensive: locations, ritual components, even the names of participating Death Eaters. We need to move before they complete their preparations, Ron argued, studying the map where Draco had marked the ritual site, an abandoned fortress on a small island off the Scottish coast. No, Hermione countered. If we move too soon, they'll just reschedule. We need to let the trap be set, then turn it to our advantage. Harry paced the length of the room, his magic fluctuating visibly, small objects rattling when he passed, lights flickering in response to his emotional state. The hollow feeling had grown worse, a constant ache that told him his shadow self was active, hunting. The priority is reintegration, he reminded them. We need to trap the shadow ourselves, then complete what I failed to do in the garden. Which means letting the Death Eaters gather, Hermione concluded. Using their meeting as bait, just as they plan to use themselves as bait. It's risky, Ron said. If Malfoy's ritual works even partially. It won't, Harry said with more confidence than he felt. Not if we modify Draco's countermeasures correctly. They worked through the night, Hermione adapting magical theories and ancient texts, Ron applying his strategic mind to their approach, and Harry fighting through increasingly severe episodes of magical drainage as his shadow continued its unseen activities. Morning brought news of another death, Alecto Carrow found in her hiding place in Northern Ireland, body desiccated like the others. The Prophet's headline screamed panic: Shadow Killer Strikes Again. Former Hogwarts professor fourth victim of mysterious entity. The article quoted anonymous ministry sources expressing concern about vigilante justice and extrajudicial killings, while others praised the cleansing of remaining Death Eater elements. The wizarding community was dividing along ideological lines, those who prioritized law and order versus those who remembered the Death Eaters' atrocities and found the justice fitting. The ministry splitting into factions, Ron reported after a brief visit to the Auror office. Robards is trying to maintain neutrality, but there's a growing sentiment that these killings are doing what the system failed to do. That kind of thinking is dangerous, Hermione argued. Once people accept extrajudicial killings for deserving targets, where does it end? I know, Harry agreed, though part of him, the part connected to his shadow, whispered that the Death Eaters were indeed getting exactly what they deserved. That evening, an unexpected visitor arrived at Grimmauld Place. Harry opened the door to find Draco Malfoy on his doorstep, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. They've moved up the timeline, he said without preamble. Tomorrow night, not 3 days from now. My father discovered I accessed his plans. Harry ushered him inside. Are you in danger? Not immediately, Draco said, accepting the tea creature grudgingly offered. He thinks I was looking for ways to protect myself, not to betray him. But he's accelerated everything as a precaution. Ron and Hermione joined them in the kitchen, initial surprise at Draco's presence quickly giving way to practical concerns. Do you have the updated plans? Hermione asked. Draco nodded, pulling scrolls from his cloak. Everything I could gather before I left. The location remains the same, but they've modified some of the ritual components. They spread the documents across the kitchen table, examining the changes. The basic strategy remained: gather all marked Death Eaters to attract the shadow entity at full power, then spring the binding trap once it appeared. This might actually work in our favor, Hermione mused, studying the modified ritual. The accelerated timeline means they're substituting some components, making the binding potentially less stable. Or more unpredictable, Draco countered. Dark magic doesn't become safer when improvised. Harry felt another wave of weakness wash over him, stronger than before. He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening as the hollow in his chest expanded painfully. "Harry?" Hermione noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" "It's hunting again," he managed through gritted teeth. "Right now. I can feel it." The others watched in alarm as Harry's shadow on the kitchen wall briefly distorted, stretching and rippling before settling back to normal. "That's disturbing," Draco commented, his face pale. "It's getting stronger with each kill," Harry explained once the episode passed. "More independent. How many on your list have been killed now?" Ron asked. 4, Harry answered. 13 remain. Draco's expression shifted to one of realization. "That's why the gathering is so important to my father. He's not just setting a trap, he's protecting himself." "He's on that list too." Harry nodded grimly. "Near the top." Their planning continued late into the night, incorporating the new timeline. By dawn, they had a counter-strategy: allow the Death Eaters to set their trap, but modify it to capture rather than bind the shadow entity, giving Harry a chance to complete the reintegration properly. "I still don't understand why it didn't fully reintegrate the first time," Ron said as they finalized their preparations. "Because Harry rejected part of what it represents," Hermione explained. "The shadow embodies his desire for direct justice, for vengeance outside the system. As long as he denies that part of himself, complete reintegration is impossible." "I don't want to be a killer," Harry said quietly. "Wanting justice for unrepentant murderers doesn't make you a killer," Draco surprised them by saying. "Denying that desire doesn't make you more virtuous, it just makes you incomplete." The others stared at him, and Draco shrugged uncomfortably. 3 years of therapy after the war. You learn things about accepting your darker impulses. Harry considered Draco's words as they finished their preparations. Perhaps his mistake had been viewing his shadow as something separate, something foreign, rather than a genuine part of himself that needed acknowledgement, not rejection. As evening approached, they made final adjustments to their plan. Harry would need to remain distant from the fortress initially, to avoid alerting the Death Eaters to their presence. Ron, Hermione, and surprisingly, Draco would infiltrate the location first, making subtle modifications to the ritual circle before Harry's arrival. "Are we sure the shadow will appear?" Ron asked as they gathered their equipment. "It will," Harry said with certainty. "It can't resist that many targets in one place, especially with its power running low. And it will return to you first, to recharge," Hermione added. "That's when we need to be ready." As they prepared to leave, Harry felt another wave of draining weakness, the strongest yet. He staggered, bracing against the wall as his vision briefly darkened. "Harry!" Hermione rushed to his side. "It's coming back," he gasped. "Now. It needs power." The lights in Grimmauld Place flickered violently, and the temperature dropped precipitously. Harry's shadow on the wall stretched and detached, forming the now familiar silhouette with glowing green eyes. "Creator," it acknowledged, its voice stronger, more distinct than before. "I require strength to continue our work." The others backed away, wands drawn instinctively, though Harry knew conventional magic would have little effect on the entity. "Our work?" Harry challenged, straightening despite his weakness. "I didn't authorize any of this. You were supposed to be reintegrated with me." The shadow's form rippled in what might have been amusement. "We are connected, not unified. Your conflict prevented true reunification. So you've been killing independently," Harry accused. "Caro was the latest, wasn't she?" "Justice delivered," the shadow confirmed. 13 remain unpunished." "And then what?" Harry demanded. "When your list is complete, what then?" The shadow seemed to consider the question. "There is always more justice needed in the world. Always more who deserve judgment." The implications chilled Harry to the bone. His shadow wasn't planning to stop with the Death Eaters. It would continue finding targets, delivering its version of justice indefinitely. That's not justice, Harry argued. That's appointing yourself judge, jury, and executioner. As you once did, the shadow countered. Have you forgotten your own actions during the war? The curses you cast? The judgment you delivered? That was different, Harry insisted, though the argument felt as hollow as the space in his chest. Was it? The shadow moved closer. You fight yourself, creator. You deny what you truly are, what you truly desire. And what's that? A deliverer of justice. One who acts when others will not, who stands between the innocent and those who would harm them, by any means necessary. The shadow's words resonated uncomfortably with Harry's deepest beliefs. Wasn't that exactly what he'd always done? Act when others wouldn't. Fight when others couldn't. The shadow sensed his wavering resolve. The Death Eaters gather tomorrow night. 13 remaining targets in one location. Justice delivered completely. They're setting a trap for you, Harry warned, surprising himself with his concern for the entity. I am aware, the shadow replied. Malfoy's binding ritual. It will fail. You don't know that, Hermione interjected, finding her voice. Dark binding magic is unpredictable, especially when modified hastily. The shadow's attention turned to her, its form shifting slightly. The clever friend. Always concerned with rules and boundaries. With reason and consequences, Hermione corrected, standing her ground despite the shadow's intimidating presence. There are consequences to inaction as well, the shadow responded. Ask the victims of those who escaped justice how they feel about rules and boundaries. Before Hermione could reply, the shadow turned back to Harry. I need strength. Will you give freely, or must I take? The question surprised Harry. You're asking permission. We are still connected. Your cooperation makes the transfer more efficient. Harry exchanged glances with the others. This development might work in their favor, if the shadow still recognized some authority from him, perhaps it could be reasoned with. I'll give you strength, Harry decided, but with conditions. The shadow waited, neither agreeing nor refusing. You don't attack until we're in position tomorrow night, Harry continued. You let us modify the trap to capture instead of bind you. Then you and I will talk, really talk, about reintegration. The shadow seemed to consider the proposal. Your plan is to reclaim me. Yes, Harry admitted. You're part of me, not some independent entity. This separation isn't sustainable. For you, perhaps, the shadow noted. I grow stronger with each judgment delivered. And more distant from your original purpose, Harry countered. You were created to deliver justice to Death Eaters who escaped punishment. Now you're talking about continuing indefinitely. The shadow rippled, its form becoming temporarily less distinct. Your terms are acceptable. I will wait until tomorrow night. And you'll allow us to modify the trap? Hermione pressed. I will not interfere with your preparations, the shadow agreed. But know this, I will not be bound against my will, by you or by Malfoy. With that ominous statement, the shadow moved toward Harry. The sensation of magical transfer was different this time, less violent, more controlled as the shadow drew power from him. Harry felt his strength ebbing, but not dangerously so, the entity taking only what it needed rather than draining him completely. When it finished, the shadow seemed more solid, more defined, its eyes glowing brighter. Until tomorrow night, Creator. It dissolved into the darkness, leaving the four of them staring at the empty space where it had stood. Well, Ron finally broke the silence. That was bloody terrifying. It's evolving, Hermione said worriedly. Becoming more independent, more self-aware. More dangerous, Draco added. If it refuses reintegration. It won't come to that, Harry insisted, though doubt gnawed at him. The shadow had sounded more confident, more autonomous than ever before. What if it decided reintegration wasn't in its interest? We need to accelerate our preparations, Harry continued, pushing his concerns aside. If the Shadow's right about the Death Eaters gathering tomorrow night, we need to be ready. The fortress on its tiny Scottish island looked deceptively peaceful in the fading daylight. Built centuries ago by a paranoid dark wizard, its stone walls were embedded with protective enchantments that had weathered the ages remarkably well. Now, those ancient defenses were being supplemented by the modern dark magic of desperate Death Eaters. From their observation point a mile offshore, Harry watched through omnioculars as hooded figures arrived by various magical means, port keys, apparition to designated points, even a few by broom. 14 figures so far, Ron reported, keeping count. Draco said to expect 15, including Lucius. The ritual preparations look nearly complete, Hermione noted, focusing her own omnioculars on the fortress's central courtyard, where an elaborate magical circle was being inscribed. We need to move soon if we're going to modify it. Draco, wrapped in a dark cloak that concealed his distinctive hair, checked his pocket watch. My father will perform a preliminary security sweep in 20 minutes. We need to be in position before then. Their plan was delicate but straightforward. Draco would enter openly, claiming to have reconsidered his position and decided to join his father. While Lucius was distracted by his son's apparent change of heart, Ron and Hermione would slip in under Harry's invisibility cloak to alter key components of the ritual circle. Harry would remain at a distance until the shadow appeared, then move in for the attempted reintegration. Remember, Hermione said seriously, the modifications need to be subtle. If they detect our changes too early. I know, Draco replied tensely. My father isn't forgiving of interference. As they prepared to separate, Harry felt the hollow sensation in his chest pulse rhythmically. His shadow was aware, watching, waiting for its moment. Despite their agreement, he wasn't entirely confident the entity would honor their terms. Be careful, he told the others. If anything goes wrong, don't hesitate to abort. We can find another way. Ron and Hermione disappeared under the invisibility cloak, while Draco straightened his posture, assuming the arrogant bearing of a Malfoy preparing to face his father. With final nods of acknowledgement, they set off toward the fortress, leaving Harry alone with his increasingly restless shadow self. Stick to the plan, he whispered, unsure if the entity could hear him at this distance. Wait for my signal. Lucius Malfoy's surprise at seeing his son approach the fortress gates quickly transformed into suspicious calculation. Draco maintained his composure, spinning a convincing tale of self-preservation and familial loyalty. The shadow entity has killed 4 already, he told his father as they walked through the fortress corridors. When I realized you were accelerating the ritual, I understood the urgency. Better to stand with family than die alone. Lucius studied his son's face carefully. A convenient change of heart. A practical one, Draco countered smoothly. I've spent 3 years rebuilding my life, father. I have no intention of losing it to Potter's vengeful shadow. The mention of Harry's name caused Lucius to pause. So you've confirmed our theory? The entity is Potter's creation? Not intentionally, Draco replied, carefully mixing truth with misdirection. From what I've gathered, it's a manifestation of his magic that escaped his control. A fragment with autonomy. This information seemed to please Lucius, a cold smile forming on his thin lips. Even better. When we bind it, we'll control a portion of Potter's own magic. The irony is, perfect. Behind them, invisible under the cloak, Ron and Hermione followed at a safe distance, listening intently to gather information while awaiting their opportunity to access the ritual site. The others have arrived? Draco asked, keeping his father engaged. All but Selwyn, Lucius confirmed. He's being cautious, but will join us before the ritual begins at midnight. Draco's heart raced, they had less time than anticipated. And the binding components? All secured. At considerable expense and risk, Lucius said with a hint of pride. The blood of a lunar-harvested thestral was particularly difficult to obtain. As they entered the central courtyard, Draco fought to keep his expression neutral. The ritual circle was far more elaborate than the plans had indicated, concentric rings of symbols drawn in various substances, artifacts positioned at cardinal points, and at the center, a containment vessel that pulsed with dark energy. Impressive, he commented, genuine unease coloring his voice. Ancient magic, Lucius explained. Predating modern limitations and restrictions. The shadow entity will be drawn to the gathering of marked followers, then trapped and transferred to the containment vessel. And then? Draco prompted, giving Ron and Hermione time to assess the ritual modifications needed. Lucius's smile widened. Then we have a weapon unlike any other, a fragment of Harry Potter's own magic, bound to our will. Imagine the possibilities, Draco. The political leverage alone would be extraordinary. Under the invisibility cloak, Hermione nudged Ron, pointing silently to specific points in the ritual circle that would need alteration. The task would be more difficult than they'd anticipated. The ritual was more complex, more carefully constructed than Draco's intelligence had suggested. I need to complete the final preparations, Lucius said. Make yourself useful and check the northern perimeter wards. Raoul's death has made everyone nervous. This was the opportunity they needed. As Draco headed toward the northern section of the fortress and Lucius moved to consult with another Death Eater, Ron and Hermione slipped carefully into the courtyard, approaching the ritual circle from the less guarded eastern side. From his vantage point, Harry watched the fortress with growing unease. The hollow feeling in his chest had intensified to a persistent ache, and his magic felt increasingly unstable. His shadow was getting restless, eager to attack the gathered Death Eaters. Not yet, he whispered. Wait for the signal. A sudden commotion at the fortress gates caught his attention. A final hooded figure had arrived, Selwyn, presumably, completing the gathering. All 13 remaining Death Eaters from Harry's list were now present, an irresistible target for his justice-seeking shadow. Harry's wand vibrated briefly, the signal from Hermione that they had successfully modified the ritual circle and were in position. Everything was ready. Now they just needed to wait for the shadow to make its move, allowing the Death Eaters to spring their altered trap. But something felt wrong. The hollow sensation in Harry's chest wasn't just painful now, it was cold, spreading through his body like ice in his veins. His shadow wasn't just restless, it was breaking their agreement. No, Harry gasped as he felt the entity pulling away from him, drawing far more power than it should need. We had a deal. In the distance, darkness seemed to coalesce around the fortress, flowing toward it from all directions. Harry's magical connection to his shadow stretched painfully, threatening to snap completely as the entity withdrew more of its essence from him. He activated his communications charm. Hermione. It's moving now. The shadow's attacking early. Her voice came back, tense with alarm. The ritual isn't fully prepared. They're still making adjustments. It doesn't care, Harry replied, already running toward the boat they'd secured for crossing to the island. It's going for all of them at once. I think it's trying to break free completely. As Harry raced toward the fortress, the sky above it darkened unnaturally, clouds swirling in patterns that defied natural weather. His shadow was manifesting at full power, drawing not just from Harry's magic now, but from the ambient magical energy of the location itself. Inside the fortress, chaos erupted as Death Eaters recognized the signs of the entity's arrival. Lucius Malfoy shouted orders, directing final desperate preparations to the ritual circle that Ron and Hermione had subtly sabotaged. It's too soon. Draco's voice carried across the courtyard. The containment vessel isn't fully charged. There's no time. Lucius responded, taking position at the northern point of the circle. Everyone to your positions. Now. Death Eaters scrambled to their assigned places, wands ready, fear evident even beneath their masks and hoods. The darkness pooled in the center of the courtyard, gathering itself into the familiar humanoid shape with glowing green eyes. Justice comes, the shadow's voice echoed throughout the fortress, audible to everyone now, not just Harry. For all who have escaped it. Now. Lucius commanded, and as one, the Death Eaters activated the ritual circle. The symbols blazed with dark fire, power surging through the carefully constructed patterns. Despite Ron and Hermione's modifications, the sheer magical force being channeled was immense, ancient, primal magic responding to the combined will of 15 dark wizards. The shadow paused, assessing the trap springing around it. For a moment, it seemed their plan might work. The entity was being drawn toward the containment vessel, exactly as intended. But then something shifted. The shadow's form expanded suddenly, tendrils of darkness lashing out in all directions. Death Eaters screamed as the cold touch found them, beginning the familiar process of draining their magic and life force. Simultaneously, the ritual circle's fire turned from dark purple to sickly green, the magic redirecting in ways neither the Death Eaters nor Harry's team had anticipated. "It's adapting," Hermione shouted, dropping the invisibility cloak as she frantically worked to stabilize their modifications. "It's using the ritual energy against them." Harry burst into the courtyard just as the chaos reached its peak. 3 Death Eaters already lay desiccated on the ground, while others fought futilely against the shadow's grasping tendrils. Lucius Malfoy, more resourceful than his companions, had erected a personal shield of some kind that temporarily held the shadow at bay. "Harry!" Ron called from where he was trying to help Hermione control the wildly fluctuating ritual energies. "It's breaking free completely. If it finishes draining them all, it won't need you anymore." Harry understood instantly. His shadow was using the Death Eater's life force and magic, combined with the ritual's own power, to achieve total independence. Once completed, it would no longer be a fragment of Harry Potter's magic, but a new entity entirely, unbound by any creator's influence, free to pursue its own version of justice indefinitely. "Stop!" Harry commanded, stepping into the ritual circle despite the dangerous energies crackling around it. "This isn't what you were created for." The shadow paused, its glowing eyes fixing on Harry. "Creator. You are too late. I am becoming." "Becoming what? A murderer? A monster?" Harry moved closer, fighting through the pain of their stretching connection. "You were born from my desire for justice, not endless killing." "Justice is absolute," the shadow replied. "Systems fail. Humans compromise. I do not." Around them, the remaining Death Eaters continued to struggle against the shadow's grip. Draco had managed to pull 2 younger members clear of the immediate danger, while Lucius maintained his protective shield, his face contorted with effort. "Potter!" Lucius called out, desperation overcoming his hatred. "Control your creation." "It's not that simple," Harry shot back, continuing to approach the shadow. "It's breaking away from me." The ritual circle's energies surged again, the containment vessel at the center cracking under pressure it was never designed to withstand. Whatever combination of Malfoy's original design and Hermione's modifications had created, the result was magical chaos, feeding the shadow's transformation while destroying the very mechanisms meant to control it. Harry reached the center of the circle, standing face to face with his shadow self. Up close, he could see how it had changed, more defined, more solid, less a reflection of Harry and more its own entity. The connection between them stretched painfully thin, threatening to snap entirely. "You're part of me," Harry insisted, reaching out toward the shadow despite the freezing cold that emanated from it. "You can't exist independently. You're my magic, my desire for justice." "I was," the shadow acknowledged. "Now I am becoming more. Through their power, their magic, I evolved beyond my creation." "To what end?" Harry demanded. "Endless killing. Is that justice?" "Justice is not finite," the shadow responded. "As long as evil exists, judgment must follow." Harry realized arguing philosophy would get him nowhere. This fragment of himself had developed its own worldview, its own purpose. Logic wouldn't reach it. Instead, Harry did something unexpected. He stepped forward and embraced his shadow self, wrapping his arms around the cold, shifting darkness as if hugging a friend. "I understand now," he said quietly. I've been fighting the wrong battle. Trying to control you, bind you, when I should have been accepting you. The shadow went rigid in his embrace, clearly not expecting this approach. Accept me. You're right about justice, Harry continued, maintaining the contact despite the painful cold seeping into his body. The system fails. Compromises happen. Guilty people walk free. Around them, the ritual energies began to shift, responding to the unexpected connection forming between creator and creation. My mistake wasn't creating you, Harry admitted. It was denying the part of myself you represent. The part that wants absolute justice, that's willing to go beyond rules and laws when necessary. The shadow's form flickered, uncertainty appearing in its glowing eyes. You rejected this truth. I did, Harry acknowledged. Because I was afraid of becoming what I fought against. Afraid that accepting my darker impulses would make me like Voldemort. You are nothing like him, the shadow stated with surprising conviction. He sought power for its own sake. You seek justice for others. Yes, Harry agreed, feeling the connection between them strengthen slightly. But justice needs balance. Needs humanity. Without it, justice becomes just another form of tyranny. The shadow considered this, its form becoming less rigid in Harry's embrace. These Death Eaters deserve judgment. They do, Harry didn't disagree. But we need to find a better way than this. Together, not separate. My humanity guiding your absolutism. The ritual circle's energies were realigning now, the wild fluctuations settling into a steady pulse that seemed to flow between Harry and his shadow. Hermione, recognizing what was happening, quickly adjusted her modifications to support the emerging pattern. It's working, she called to Ron. The ritual is becoming a conduit for reintegration rather than binding. Lucius, seeing his plans collapsing, made a desperate move. Kill Potter, he commanded the remaining Death Eaters. Break the connection. Several curses flew toward Harry, but the shadow moved with impossible speed, tendrils of darkness intercepting each spell before it could reach its creator. You will not harm him, the shadow's voice thundered through the courtyard. He is me, and I am him. The statement sent a surge of power through the ritual circle, the symbols blazing brighter than before. Harry felt the connection with his shadow strengthening, the hollow ache in his chest beginning to fill as the entity recognized their fundamental unity. Come home, Harry said softly. Not as a prisoner, not as a controlled fragment, but as an accepted part of me. My shadow self, my darker justice, integrated with my humanity. The shadow's form began to lose definition, edges blurring as it moved closer to Harry. We will be one again. Better than before, Harry promised. Not me suppressing you, but us working together. Justice with compassion. Strength with restraint. And them? The shadow indicated the remaining Death Eaters with a ripple of its form. They escaped justice again. No, Harry said firmly. They face justice through the system we're reforming. With evidence, trials, proper sentences. And if the system fails again? He left the implication hanging, a promise rather than a threat. The shadow seemed to understand, its form relaxing further, beginning to flow around Harry like a dark embrace. Now, Hermione. Harry called out. She activated the final modification to the ritual, and the energy pattern shifted one last time. Instead of pulling the shadow toward the containment vessel, the magic now flowed between Harry and his creation, creating a bridge for reunification. The shadow's voice spoke one last time, softer now, almost intimate. We will be stronger together. Yes, Harry agreed. We will. With that, the shadow collapsed inward, flowing into Harry like water into parched earth. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced, not painful as he'd feared, but like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. The hollow ache vanished, replaced by a completeness that resonated through his entire being. The ritual circle flared brilliantly, then faded, its purpose fulfilled in ways its creators never intended. Harry stood alone at its center, his eyes briefly flashing with green fire before returning to normal. Around him, the surviving Death Eaters stared in confusion and fear, uncertain what had just happened or what would follow. Lucius Malfoy's protective shield flickered and died, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. "It's over," Harry announced, his voice carrying a new weight, a new authority. "Your trap failed. Your weapon is gone. What have you done, Potter?" Lucius demanded, trying to maintain some semblance of control despite his obvious fear. Harry smiled, and there was something in that smile, a shadow of his other self, that made even Lucius Malfoy step back. "I've accepted every part of myself," Harry replied simply. "Something you might want to consider." With a flick of his wand, responding now with power and precision unlike anything he'd experienced before, Harry summoned anti-apparition wards around the entire fortress. "Aurors will be here shortly," he informed the gathered Death Eaters. "You'll all be taken into custody to face trial for your crimes. Proper trials, with evidence and witnesses." "What evidence?" one of the hooded figures sneered. "Our secrets died with Rookwood and the others." Harry tapped his temple lightly. "Not all their secrets. My shadow self was very thorough in extracting confessions before delivering judgment. I now remember everything they revealed in their final moments." The implications silenced the remaining protests. One by one, the Death Eaters lowered their wands, recognizing the futility of resistance. Ron and Hermione approached Harry cautiously, uncertain what the reintegration had done to their friend. "Harry?" Hermione asked tentatively. "Are you, yourself?" Harry turned to them, his expression softening. "More myself than I've been in a long time. Complete." Ron studied him carefully. "And the shadow? Is it really reintegrated this time?" "Yes," Harry confirmed. "Not suppressed or controlled, but accepted. Part of me now." "And the killing stops?" Hermione pressed, needing reassurance. Harry nodded. "That approach to justice ends here. We'll work within the system, the reformed system we're building." His gaze drifted to where Draco stood apart from the other Death Eaters, his contribution to their plan evident in his separation from his father. "Thank you," Harry told him sincerely. "We couldn't have done this without you." Draco nodded once, acceptance rather than acknowledgement. "What happens now?" "Now," Harry said, his voice carrying both compassion and resolve, "justice continues, but with humanity guiding it, not vengeance." As Aurors began arriving, responding to the signal Ron had sent, Harry felt the last pieces of his shadow self settling within him. Not gone, not suppressed, but integrated, a part of his magic, his personality, his being that he would no longer deny. The justice would continue, as would the fight against darkness. But Harry Potter was whole again, shadow and light united in perfect balance. And somewhere in the depths of his newly complete being, the shadow whispered its satisfaction. Chapter 3, The Scales of Judgment. Harry Potter ducked under a sizzling purple curse that smelled like burning ozone and ozone-infused rotting meat. Not the best combination for a Tuesday morning, but hey, the life of an Auror wasn't all signing autographs and drinking butterbeer. 3 on the left. Ron shouted, his voice cracking over the roar of exploding crates. "Got 'em." Harry didn't even look. He just snapped his wand in a sharp, horizontal arc. Umbra Legatis. Shadows detached themselves from the warehouse walls, actual, physical shadows that looked like they'd been hitting the gym, and surged forward. They didn't kill, Harry had been very specific about that. Instead, the darkness wrapped around the 3 masked smugglers like constrictor snakes made of smoke, binding their arms and legs tight. The smugglers dropped to the concrete, struggling uselessly against bonds that weren't made of matter you could just vanish. "Show off," Ron grinned, stunning a 4th guy who popped up from behind a stack of illegal dragon hide crates. "Efficiency, Ron. It's all about efficiency." Harry stepped over a pile of debris, his boots crunching on shattered glass. He felt the hum of the shadow inside him, not a separate voice anymore, just a deep, cold reservoir of power sitting right next to his heart. It felt good. Balanced. Like having a loaded gun in a holster that you knew exactly how to use. This raid was supposed to be a simple bust on a Nocturne Alley supplier, but since the garden incident, a month ago, the criminal underworld was jittery. They knew Harry Potter wasn't playing by the old rulebook. He wasn't breaking the law, but he was definitely bending the laws of magic to enforce it. "Clear," shouted Proudfoot from the upper gantry. Harry scanned the room. His vision flickered for a microsecond, shifting into grayscale where living things glowed with a faint aura. It was a perk of the reintegration. He saw a faint pulse behind a fake wall in the back. "Not clear," Harry muttered. He raised his hand, palm open. The shadows in the corner of the room coalesced into a solid spike. With a flick of his wrist, he sent it flying. Thunk. The spike embedded itself in the brickwork, inches from where a concealed door suddenly popped open. A wizard tumbled out, yelping, hands in the air. "I surrender. Don't let the shadow thing eat me." Harry walked over, the shadows receding back into the natural gloom of the warehouse. He leaned down, his green eyes flashing with that unsettling inner light that made suspects with themselves. "Nobody's getting eaten today, Fletcher," Harry said, recognizing the Weasleys' old annoyance. "Unless you don't tell me who's buying these dragon hides." Mundungus Fletcher looked at Harry, then at the lingering tendrils of darkness on the floor. "Malfoy's associates. The ones you didn't catch at the fortress. They're scrambling, Harry. Terrified. They say you're the new Dark Lord." "I'm the new chief of the Auror Office's Special Task Force," Harry corrected, pulling Mundungus up by his collar. "And I'm late for lunch. Book him, Ron." As Harry walked out into the London drizzle, the adrenaline faded, replaced by that cool, calm sensation. The reintegration worked. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't a murderer. But he was dangerous. And for the first time in his life, he was totally okay with that. Grimmauld Place had changed. It wasn't just the fresh paint or the lack of screaming portraits, the magical pressure in the house had shifted. It used to feel heavy and oppressive. Now, it felt like a coiled spring. Ginny was waiting in the kitchen when Harry got home, nursing a mug of tea and reading a Quidditch magazine. She didn't look up immediately, but Harry saw the slight tension in her shoulders. "Rough day?" she asked, turning a page. "Standard. Mundungus is back in a holding cell. Probably for the best, keeps him off the streets." Harry grabbed an apple from the bowl, leaning against the counter. The shadows under the cabinets reached out playfully toward his boots before he subconsciously willed them back. Ginny looked up then, her eyes tracking the movement. She didn't flinch. That was one of the million reasons Harry was crazy about her. She'd grown up with brothers who tested explosives in the living room, a boyfriend with sentient shadow magic was just another Tuesday. "You're doing it again," she noted, pointing her mug at the floor. "Sorry." Still calibrating the ambient response. Harry focused, and the lighting in the room normalized. "Are we still on for dinner at the Burrow? Mum's making a fuss." "It's a congratulations on not being possessed by an ancient evil dinner." Catchy title. Ginny stood up and walked over, placing a hand on his chest. She wasn't checking for a heartbeat, she was checking for him. "Harry, people are talking. The Daily Prophet is running an op-ed tomorrow asking if the chosen one has become the judging one. Skeeter's calling you an authoritarian nightmare." Harry sighed, resting his forehead against hers. "Let them talk. Crime is down 40%. The Death Eater network is shattered. Lucius is in a holding cell waiting for the trial of the century tomorrow. The system works when you actually have the power to enforce it. It's not the results they're worried about. It's the method." She pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. "You're scary, Harry. Even to me, sometimes. Not because I think you'll hurt me, but because you look like you're carrying a thunderstorm inside your skin. I'm fine, Jin. Really? Are you? Because Ron says you stunned a suspect today with a look. Literally. You didn't even cast a spell. He was running. I used a low-level intimidation flare. It's a technique. It's shadow magic, Harry. She squeezed his arms. Just, be careful tomorrow. Lucius Malfoy doesn't go down without a fight, even in chains. And with this new power, if you lose control in the Wisengamot chamber. I won't. Harry kissed her, brief but fierce. I'm in the driver's seat. The shadow and I. We have an understanding. That's what worries me, she whispered against his lips. Understandings can change. The next morning, the Ministry of Magic was a zoo. Reporters swarmed the atrium like nifflers in a jewelry shop. Flashbulbs popped in blinding staccato rhythms as Harry, Ron, and Hermione pushed their way toward the elevators. Statement, Mr. Potter. Is it true you can walk through walls now? Mr. Potter. Do you plan to execute Lucius Malfoy personally? Harry. Over here. Are you building a secret army of shadow demons? No comment, no, and that would be cool but no, Harry muttered, shoving past a particularly aggressive photographer. Once the elevator grills clattered shut, silence descended. Hermione looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She was clutching a thick binder of legal briefs so tight her knuckles were white. The defense is going to plead magical coercion, Hermione said, launching into her briefing before the lift even started moving. They're claiming the shadow entity, that's you, Harry, corrupted Lucius's mind during the confrontation at the fortress, forcing him to perform the dark rituals. That's garbage, Ron snorted, adjusting his dress robes which were uncomfortably tight around the neck. We saw him. He was leading the whole thing. It doesn't matter what's true, Ron, it matters what they can prove, Hermione snapped, though her tone wasn't angry, just stressed. Harry, if they goad you. If you show even a flicker of darkness. They want to paint me as the monster, Harry finished. I know the play, Hermione. I'm not going to crack. The lift chimed. Level 10. Courtrooms. The dungeon level was cold. It always was, but today it felt frigid. The stone walls seemed to absorb the light. As they walked down the corridor to courtroom 10, Harry felt the shadow inside him stir. It wasn't restless or hungry like before, it was alert. Like a guard dog hearing a twig snap. Threat, the thought whispered in his mind. Not a voice, just an impression. Harry paused. Something's off. Ron drew his wand instantly. What is it? I don't know. The magic down here, it tastes stale. Old. Harry shook his head. Let's just get this over with. The doors to courtroom 10 swung open. The stands were packed. The entire Wisengamot was seated in their plum-colored robes, looking down like a parliament of judgmental owls. In the center of the room, chained to the chair with heavy magical suppression cuffs, sat Lucius Malfoy. He looked terrible. His hair was lank, his face gaunt. But his eyes were bright. Too bright. When Harry walked in, Lucius smiled. It wasn't a smirk of arrogance. It was the smile of a man holding a grenade with the pin pulled. Kingsley Shacklebolt sat at the head of the chamber. He banged his gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Disciplinary hearing of the 12th of June, Kingsley boomed. The Ministry versus Lucius Abraxas Malfoy. Charges, conspiracy, use of dark arts, attempted murder, and high treason. The trial began, and it was a circus. The defense attorney, a greasy man named Greengrass, spun a tale of a poor, misunderstood philanthropist terrorized by a vigilante aura. He painted Harry as a loose cannon, a weapon that the Ministry couldn't control. Harry stood in the witness box, hands clasped behind his back, calm as a frozen lake. Every accusation Greengrass threw at him, Harry deflected with cool logic. Yes, I used unconventional tactics. No, I did not torture the defendant. The magical residue you found was from the reintegration ritual, which saved the defendant's life from the backlash of his own failed spell. Greengrass was getting frustrated. He wiped sweat from his brow. Mr. Potter, is it not true that you harbor a sentient dark entity within your soul? A creature that feeds on death? The courtroom gasped. Whispers broke out. Harry locked eyes with Greengrass. I harbor a manifestation of justice. It feeds on nothing. It ensures that those who break the law face the consequences. Unlike the previous administration, I don't believe gold should buy freedom. Order! Kingsley shouted over the rising din. That's when Lucius spoke. He didn't ask for permission. He just raised his head and looked directly at Harry. Justice, Lucius rasped. His voice carried unnaturally well, cutting through the noise. You speak of justice, boy. You speak of consequences. Lucius, silence, Kingsley warned. I have been silent for too long. Lucius stood up. The chains rattled violently. You think you defeated us at the fortress? You think capturing me ends this? You are a child playing with forces that date back to the first sunrise. Harry felt the shadow inside him lurch. Danger! Harry, get back! Hermione yelled from the gallery. Lucius began to chant. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't any language Harry had ever heard. It sounded like stones grinding together, like the earth splitting open. The suppression cuffs on Lucius's wrists didn't break, they melted. They turned into liquid silver that flowed up his arms, carving glowing runes into his skin. I offer my life. Lucius screamed, his eyes rolling back into his head. I offer my blood. I offer my soul. Come forth, Anubis. Come forth, Judge of the Void. Weigh this pretender and find him wanting. Stupefy. Ron shouted, firing a red bolt from the front row. The spell hit Lucius and dissolved. The air in the courtroom turned instantly into a vacuum. Sound vanished. Light vanished. Harry felt a hook slam into his navel, not a portkey, but something deeper. The shadow inside him roared, surging outward to protect him, but this wasn't an attack on his body. It was a summons. The floor of the courtroom dissolved into black sand. The walls melted away into an infinite, starless sky. Harry wasn't in the ministry anymore. He was standing on a vast plain of obsidian glass. The sky was a swirling vortex of indigo and violet clouds. In the distance, towering impossibly high, stood a set of golden scales. They were big enough to weigh mountains. Where the hell are we? Harry spun around. Ron and Hermione were there, stumbling on the slippery glass surface. And Kingsley. And about a dozen members of the Wisingamot who had been closest to the center. Dimensional displacement, Hermione gasped, clutching her wand, looking around wildly. We've been pulled into a pocket dimension. A judgment plane. Lucius, he didn't just summon a monster. He summoned a construct of divine judgment. Where's Lucius? Ron asked, wand raised. Here. The voice boomed from everywhere and nowhere. Lucius Malfoy stepped out of the swirling mist. But he wasn't the gaunt prisoner anymore. He was translucent, glowing with a sickly pale light, and he looked, hollowed out. A puppet being worn by something else. The ritual required a sacrifice, the Lucius thing said. I paid the price to bring you here, Potter. To the Hall of Truth. You killed yourself to drag us into a dream? Harry asked, stepping in front of Hermione and Ron. He could feel his shadow magic vibrating violently. It recognized this place. This was its home turf. This was where the concept of judgment came from. Not a dream, Lucius smiled, but his jaw hung loose, like the strings were cut. A trial. You claim to be the avatar of justice. You claim to wield the shadow. Then let us see if you are worthy of it. The ground shook. From the darkness behind Lucius, a figure emerged. It was 10 feet tall, with the head of a jackal and a body made of black stone and starlight. It held a staff in one hand and pointed a long, clawed finger at Harry with the other. The entity, Kingsley whispered, his deep voice shaking. The guardian of the scales. Potter, Lucius sneered. The guardian does not tolerate false idols. You have stolen the power of judgment. Now, it will rip that power from your soul and devour you whole. The jackal-headed giant slammed its staff onto the obsidian floor. A shockwave of pure force knocked everyone flat except Harry. Harry planted his feet. He didn't use a shield charm. He didn't use a wall of stone. He let the shadow inside him flow out. It coated his skin like armor, turning his clothes into a shifting trench coat of darkness. His eyes blazed emerald green. You want to judge me? Harry yelled at the giant. Get in line. The guardian didn't speak. It moved. It was faster than a blinking eye. One moment it was 50 feet away, the next it was swinging that staff at Harry's head. Harry ducked, the staff whistling over his hair, and uppercut with a fist wrapped in shadow magic. Crack. His fist connected with the stone jaw. It felt like punching a mountain, but the giant stumbled back. Ron. Flank left. Hermione, figure out how to get us out of here. Kingsley, keep the civilians safe. Harry barked orders instinctively. On it. Ron scrambled to the side, firing blasting curses at the giant's knees. They chipped the stone, annoying the creature more than hurting it. The giant turned its jackal gaze on Ron. It opened its mouth and breathed a stream of blue fire. Protego Maxima. Hermione screamed, throwing up a shimmering dome over Ron. The fire washed over it, hissing like angry snakes. The shield held, but barely. Harry. It's feeding on the ambient magic. Hermione yelled. We can't beat it with standard spells. It absorbs them. Then we use something non-standard. Harry retorted. He focused. He reached deep into that cold reservoir. He didn't just draw from it, he dove into it. We need to fight, Harry told the shadow. We are ready, the shadow replied. Harry jumped. He launched himself 30 feet into the air, propelled by tendrils of darkness. He landed on the giant's back, grabbing the stone fur. The giant thrashed, trying to swat him like a fly. Harry jammed his wand into a crack in the stone armor. Defindo. Nothing happened. The magic fizzled. Okay, bad plan. Harry jumped off just as the giant slammed its back against a pillar of obsidian. Harry rolled to a stop next to Lucius's glowing ghost. You can't win, Potter, Lucius laughed, his voice sounding like dry leaves. That is a god you are fighting. Or near enough. I've fought gods before. They bleed just like everyone else. Harry stood up, dusting off his hands. Hermione. The scales. Look at the scales. In the distance, the giant golden scales were tipping. On one side, a white feather. On the other, nothing. It's weighing your heart, Harry. Hermione shouted, dodging a piece of falling debris. As long as the fight goes on, it's judging you. If the scale tips fully, you die. So I have to prove I'm, what? Good. Just. Balanced. Hermione realized. You have to show balance. You're fighting with pure rage right now. Pure shadow. You need to mix it. Harry looked at the giant, which was preparing for another charge. He looked at his hands, wreathed in black smoke. Hermione was right. He was leaning too hard on the shadow. He was enjoying the power too much. That was the trap. Lucius wanted him to lose himself in the darkness so the Guardian would recognize him as a threat to be purged. Harry closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. He thought about the raid yesterday, not the power, but the restraint. He thought about Ginny drinking tea. He thought about Ron covering his back. He thought about the sunrise over Grimmauld Place. He didn't push the shadow away. He pulled the light in. Lumos, Harry whispered. It was a first-year spell. The simplest charm in the book. But Harry poured everything he had into it. Not just magic, but intent. A sphere of blinding white light erupted from his wand, but it didn't disperse. It mixed with the shadows swirling around him. The black smoke turned into a swirling vortex of gray, silver and charcoal, light and dark dancing together. The giant froze. It tilted its head. Harry stepped forward. He didn't run. He walked. I am not a monster, Harry said, his voice amplified by the duality of his magic. And I am not a saint. I am a man who does what is necessary. He raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. This wasn't his usual stag. This was something new. The silver mist burst forth, but it was laced with veins of obsidian. It took the form of a stag, yes, but a stag with antlers made of shadow, hooves that left cracks in the reality floor. It was terrifying and beautiful. The stag lowered its head and charged. The Guardian raised its staff, but the stag didn't hit it with force. It hit it with truth. The Patronus passed right through the stone giant. The giant howled, a sound of metal tearing. It dropped to its knees. The stone armor began to crack, leaking starlight. No. Lucius's ghost screamed. Destroy him. He is corrupt. Harry walked past the kneeling giant, straight to Lucius. You missed the point, Lucius, Harry said, his eyes now a swirling mix of normal green and glowing emerald. You can't judge someone who has already accepted their own darkness. Harry reached out. He didn't use a curse. He used the connection, the shadow link that Lucius had tried to exploit. You want to be part of the judgment? Harry asked. Fine. Join it. He touched Lucius's spectral chest. The shadow inside Harry surged, but not to kill. It surged to collect. It pulled the remaining magical energy of the ritual, the energy holding this pocket dimension together, and absorbed it. The world shattered. The sensation of returning to reality was like being flushed down a very cold toilet. Harry hit the stone floor of courtroom 10 hard. He gasped, lungs burning as real air rushed in. The courtroom was silent. The chains in the center of the room were empty. A pile of dust lay on the chair where Lucius Malfoy had been. Harry. Ginny was running from the gallery, vaulting over the railing. She skidded to her knees beside him. Are you okay? You vanished. For 5 minutes, everyone just vanished. Harry sat up, groaning. He looked around. Ron was groggily getting to his feet. Hermione was checking Kingsley for a pulse. He was groaning, so that was a good sign. I'm okay, Harry rasped. He looked at his hands. They looked normal. No shadows. No glowing light. Just scarred, dusty hands. But he felt it. The change. The Guardian hadn't just been defeated, its test had been passed. The shadow inside him felt heavier. Denser. But also quieter. It wasn't a separate entity anymore. It was just him. What happened? Greengrass, the defense attorney, was shaking under his table. Where is my client? Harry stood up, using Ginny's shoulder for support. He looked at the pile of dust on the chair. His appeal was denied, Harry said. The aftermath was exactly the kind of bureaucratic nightmare Harry hated, but he navigated it with a new kind of ease. Lucius Malfoy was declared dead, cause of death, catastrophic magical backlash resulting from high treasonous rituals. The Wizengamot, having been literally dragged to a hell dimension and saved by Harry, decided to drop all inquiries into his methods. In fact, they were suddenly very keen on passing Shacklebolt's reform bills. Funny how almost getting eaten by a jackal god changes your perspective on political obstructionism. 3 weeks later, things had settled into a new normal. Harry sat in his office, feet up on the desk. The office was larger now. Head of Magical Law Enforcement was a title he hadn't asked for, but Robards had retired the day after the trial, citing, "I'm too old for dimensional travel," and Kingsley hadn't given Harry a choice. Ron walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He kicked the door shut with his heel. "You know, people are still terrified of you," Ron said, setting a cup down. "The new recruits won't look you in the eye. They'll get over it." Harry took a sip. "How's the cleanup going?" "Good. We found the last of Malfoy's stash. Draco actually helped us decode the ledger. He's dealing with it. I think he's just glad his dad didn't succeed in summoning an apocalypse." "Draco's all right," Harry mused. "We should invite him to drinks. Make it awkward. Hermione would love that. She's already trying to get him to lecture on ancient summoning ethics." Harry chuckled, looking out the enchanted window. It showed a bright, clear summer day. The shadow was still there. It always would be. He could feel it in the corners of the room, in the ink on his quill, in the cool shade under his desk. It was a part of his soul, a permanent mark of the anger and the justice he carried. But he wasn't haunted by it. "Hey," Ron said, breaking his reverie. "You coming tonight? Molly's making treacle tart." Harry swung his legs down. He grabbed his cloak. As he swung it over his shoulders, the fabric seemed to ripple like smoke for just a second, a playful wink from the universe. "Yeah," Harry smiled, checking his reflection. Green eyes, messy hair, and a shadow that walked exactly in step with him. "I'm coming. I wouldn't miss it." He walked to the door, paused, and flicked the light switch off. The room plunged into darkness, but Harry didn't mind. He wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. The dark was just another way to see the light. "After you, boss," Ron grinned. "Shut up, Weasley." Harry Potter stepped out into the corridor, ready for whatever came next. The hunt was over, but the work? The work was just beginning. And for the first time, he was whole enough to handle it. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.